Welcome. My name is Matt Neal. I'm the artistic director here at Roulette. I wanted to just say, hey, welcome to Roulette if you've never been here before. Thanks for coming. This is the third night of Mixology Fest, which is our celebration of new and unusual uses of technology in music and media art. Excited to do a workshop as part of Mixology this year. We're doing a whole series of workshops this season at Roulette. So I wanted to just mention that. We did an amazing one with Ellen Fullman and Teresa Wong last month as a lead up to their 2 nights of performances here. We have the next one happening as a co-presentation with eFlux. It's not here at Roulette, it's at the eFlux space in Manhattan. It's with Maria Chavez and Miriam Rezai and Victoria Shen, who are then performing here at Roulette the next night. They're doing a turntable trio that's going on tour. So that workshop will be about turntablism, uses of turntables, and creative use of turntables. And then we have another workshop happening in April by Wayne Horvitz. And Wayne is doing a workshop on Butch Morris's conduction, which is a language of signs and hand signals for doing live composition with improvisers. And then the following night, Wayne will be presenting 2 bands that utilize conduction of his. So those will be killer, and then we have a whole bunch more being planned right now for the fall. So just to keep an eye out for workshops at Roulette. One cool thing is that all workshops are free for members, so if you're a member of Roulette, you can get free tickets to all the workshops. So that's to hype up the membership here at Roulette. So super excited to have Femi here today to do a Ciat-Lonbarde workshop. Peter Blaster's work is super influential on me, so I was so excited to find Femi's work, and I'm gonna pass it over to him. Oh, one thing I was gonna mention is that I have this microphone. The reason I have this microphone is because we're live streaming this workshop, and there'll be an opportunity for questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'll come over to you with the microphone so that it gets recorded as part of the documentation and on the live stream for people watching from home. So thank you. Here's Femi.
Hi, welcome. Yeah, so for the first part of this, it's gonna be like 2 main parts. I'm gonna do a presentation on just my practice and kind of how I got into building circuits and like what led me through the pathway of making experimental music with electronics and hardware and some software stuff. But yeah. And then you can like dim the lights for the presentation so you can see. But yeah, so this is me. I'm Femi, Femi Shonuga Fleming. I am studying architecture at RISD right now in Rhode Island. That's my basic intro. I've been performing live electronics for around like 5 years now, like back and forth between here and Providence and Massachusetts area. Yeah, so my practice started with experimenting with like sound and space, like performing electronics and experimenting with playing audio in different spaces. So this was an experiment where I made a giant plastic enclosure that I performed in to sort of start to break away from like traditional acoustics. So making new spaces that would not only manipulate the sound, but then like bring the sound into a different environment. One thing that was really influential to my work was I took a class at RISD called Spatial Audio, which let me position sound in space in an abstract way. So they have a dome set up in the Spatial Audio studio that's 24 speakers in a dome array, and you can either use software to send audio to different speakers, or you can like pan audio around the space. And this influenced how I began to think about sound as much more spatial than like our normal stereo experience, and then also led me to want to experiment more with generative audio whether it be with like electronics or with playing around with positioning sound in space differently. So this was an album from that work. My work initially was inspired by this piece that I saw at the Whitney by Kevin Beasley called The View of a Landscape, where he enclosed a cotton gin in a soundproof container with a bunch of microphones, and then in the other room, he processed all the audio with this modular system. And this was like the first time I saw modular or like any audio hardware that wasn't from a computer, and I was really inspired by the idea of a hardware thing being separate than your computer. Like you go to your synthesizer to compose or to experiment as a separate entity rather than it being like in the same place that you like check your emails. And also just playing around with changing the state of a material or an object that has so much history to say something new about it or to bring it into new light through sculpture and manipulation of sound. And this is my modular synthesizer that well, if you don't know what modular synthesis is, I think that's why I put the slide here. So modular is, you have a case and you have different units that are hardware, and you can place them in the case, and each unit does a different thing. Like you can have your sound source, something that generates sequences or voltages or triggers, and then you can compose this case and sell things and buy things, and there's a whole community surrounding modular that is really welcoming and lets you really experiment and like hone in on your sound. Like there's so much control over all the elements that it can be kind of overwhelming, but at the same time, as you spend more time with it, you get to really design sound. And I've found that I have gotten like so far like outside of what I like just like making like kind of like impossible sounds in the same way that I like making impossible spaces when I am experimenting with positioning sound in space. So that's what I'll say about that. And then granular is a big part of my process. What granular synthesis is taking a sound source like an audio recording and then filling it into a buffer, and then you can scan through the buffer and play snippets of the audio. And there's multiple ways of doing this. You can it chops the audio up into grains, and you can scan through the grains and like stretch out or like compress audio dynamically. And that was sort of the connection between audio being like its own thing that exists in the world. Like you can take field recordings of audio that's already in nature and then stretch it and distort it and abstract it into a different space. So that's why granular is important to me. And then I wrote some notes about granular, like it reminds me of like raindrops in a storm, or the repetition is sort of like a ritual practice of like repeating something. The evolution of audio, like you can start with a source, but then over time it may like switch into separate genes or like separate generations, and thinking about the connection between granular and like evolution of humans and the world. So it's connected in so many more depths than just like audio synthesis. And that led me to thinking about ways of interacting like electronic music and or electronics in general in nature. I think they should always be connected, which is why also the Ciat-Lonbarde stuff is so interesting to me, and I'll get to that in a point. But this is a piece by my friend Enzo, who was using a Geiger counter that was sending, Geiger counter and radioactive material that was sending pulses to an amplifier, and just the direct connection between like radioactive material and an amplifier pointed at like a giant cliff wall was really inspiring, because it's like using the acoustics of like an existing environment and using electronics to amplify some other natural thing. So the Geiger counter kind of acts, the Geiger counter and the amplifier kind of act as just a vessel or a tool for amplification and manipulation of space rather than it being like a musical instrument. And I think that, electronics and electronic instruments should also be tools as much as they are things that create music. So, this is from an event called Algatrek by M. DiNardo is the one that organized it, and it was also kind of transcendental for me because the goal of the event was to bring like people that are into live code and playing electronics and like hike up a mountain and play audio in the woods. And this was sort of a way for me to connect back to nature, but then also continue to like manipulate and stretch the ways I think about sound and space. Like sound should be not only played in like venues that are made for it, but it can be kind of expressed anywhere, and any electronic sound can be expressed anywhere. And thinking about how we think about electronic sound is also changing in this state. So that was interesting. And I did textiles for my first year at RISD, and this was like a punch card also thinking about an audio waveform from like Surge Modular, but then translating it into a textile or elongating it into a sleeve. And that was that piece. And then thinking about the dichotomies between like ritual practice, religion, and indigenous culture, and like club culture in the same way, like a church where everyone is facing the altar and there's a priest is the same thing as like a crowd of people facing a DJ, and like what those two spaces mean, and how going to a club is the same ritual practice that it might be for someone to practice a religion. And then gestures, so onto Ciat-Lonbarde, Peter Blasser makes these wonderful instruments that are a marriage of wood and electronics. And I think because the wood is such a physical thing, it allows for new types of gestures and interaction with the material. And I think Peter's critique on Eurorack synths is that, at least at the beginning of Eurorack, it used to be all like aluminum panels, or it would look like scientific test equipment, and it's like, this is an electronic device. And Peter sort of breaks that by using different types of local woods. In Baltimore, I think, is where he started doing this. And this is a piece that I built called the Knob Shrine that's just 2 buttons and 2 knobs. So it's also kind of breaking the notion of like, I need to know what things do, or I need to like super understand this whole modular system. And it's just, you have 2 knobs and 2 buttons, and whatever sound comes out is what comes out. And I think more instruments should be gestural like that. And I'll show a video of Peter's work called the deer horn, which is a deer horn is a antenna, and I can pass. Well, I'll do that later actually. But here is a video. Oop, that's not open. You'll see. The main part of that video that I wanted to show. It's very short. So Peter is like already playing with like so many extensions of modular. Like, it's not, modular has to be on a table, on like your classic noise table, and it's up on a wall, it's a tapestry, it's artwork, it's paper, it's not even a circuit board, and you can interact with it in like such a physical way, and that is also why Peter's work is like so beyond the conventional idea of like playing with synthesizers and designing circuits. Yeah. And then this is one of Peter's instruments that I built myself. And thinking about Peter's way of thinking about wood and materiality, I decided to use mink from my great-grandmother's coat as the pulse section for this synthesizer, which kind of makes you like dig through the fur in order to make your patch points, which I feel was like a way that it could be much more fun and either gross or disgusting to people, or like really a ritual experience to interact with the synth. And I like the idea that the other modules are more conventional with banana jacks, and then they all don't make sound on themselves. They need a pulse, so you have to go to the section with the fur first as the pulse brain. Another example of this is Peter's solar sounders, which are solar-powered synthesizers that don't need anything. You build them into a box and then take them out into nature, and they only make sound during the day, which is also a beautiful way to like mandatory give a connection between electronics and nature. Like it only functions in certain nature qualities. And this is an example of Daniel Fishkin's solar sounders. Yeah, and also the idea with the solar sounders is that Peter was trying to recreate like birds in nature, or trains passing by his place in Baltimore. So thinking about even taking things from your surrounding environments and embedding them into the design practice of building synthesizers is super interesting. Yeah, and on the note of that, the Coco Quantus is a delay that Peter built, and the center is also kind of designed based off the geography of DC, which he visited, and has a bunch of Chinese characters from when he was studying East Asian studies, I think, at either Wesleyan or the other one. And also anyone can shout out things if they know things that I don't say correctly. Or if anyone has any questions, you can always. Yeah, and on the note of that, I wanted to talk about the Yari kind of copy paper, which is just like a term that I wrote in my notes app at a certain point. But yeah, the idea of the hand plane, which is like the human connection to materiality, or to any organic material, or having human control over things, and the copy paper, which is like synthesized, repetitive, granular medium that is both organic in nature and super synthetic, and it's bleached white, like repeated thing. So the marriage of code and bonsai trees, etc. This is Peter Blasser. The name Ciat-Lonbarde came from a drawing of his called Stores at the Mall, in which he envisioned a bunch of separate stores for synthesizers that could come together at one point. So he took Ciat-Lonbarde, and there are also, this is the knob shrine and some other things that he named instruments after. He's most known for I think this is most notably his instrument, the plum butter, which is a drum and drama machine, and he separates sections of this, and this is similar to the thing that I built, but there is like drums and drama, and each section has such a deep history in the design practice, such as like the gongs might sound like just like like pinging a filter or like a sine wave pulse, but it's a representation of like gamelan gongs players like waiting for the right moment to like strike the gong, and there's so much like history and interaction with like nature and different cultures that encapsulates what Peter's doing, and you can sort of make your own sort of cities and subsystems with your modular synth, which I think also is a good way to go about like thinking about playing music, both playing it and patching your modular, like where to start or how to think about things, because I don't think it has to be like, oh, this is an oscillator, it has to go into a filter and then into my mixer. It can be like, this is like a car on my block and it's being really loud and needs to pass by. Like it can be a whole journey, like the oscillators are the city and maybe the forest is like the reverb or something. And he talks about this here. And the roll synthesizer was the sort of main thing that he was talking about at the beginning, which is like a tapestry with different modules on it. That was his first thing. That was like, I want to interact with modular in a different way. I want it to be on the wall. I want to be able to like go up to it, or it generates and is hanging. And I'll show a video of that as well. He also made it in the form of an admiral's coat. Y'all see. So the idea is that you're wearing the synthesizer. I'll skip to this as well. But the ethos is also like synthesizers should be beautiful. It's that like interaction that I'm really attracted by too. It's just like the hard is the modular and the soft is the Nabra brain synthesizer. Oh, okay, I put it in here as well. Oh, Daniel Fishkin also made a version of the Sidrasi, which is one of Peter's instruments, that uses like piezos and pushing onto the wooden bars to make sound come out, or to change the circuit or circuit bend the circuit in some way. And Daniel placed these bars underneath a bed so that the interaction of bed activities would activate a synthesizer. And I think that is also like such a beautiful marriage of many things, but it's like mind-blowing in my opinion. It's like very my whole thing. And that synthesizers also should be circuit bent. Like modular already does this by bringing all the inputs and outputs forward to you, but it's still sort of designed so that you know what things are. But I like the idea of the shit synth, which is just a board that you don't know what anything does, and you just touch it and rub on it until it makes sounds that you like or makes sounds that you hate. There's an example of that here. The idea of the spoon is that you ground yourself to the synth. Yeah, but it should also be funny. Like the spoon is great. It could have been anything, like a bracelet to ground yourself, but it has to be the spoon. Yeah, and then more things, and then yeah, let's get into paper circuits. So, what I'm going to be doing today is building a one of Peter's paper circuits. I'm building it as a PCB version, which is like manufactured, but Peter's idea of paper circuits was that he can put these circuits that he was building and experimenting with up online for anyone to just print out of their out of their printer, and then you fold it in half and put all your components through the paper, and then you solder it on the other side. And I can pass this around if someone wants to come up and grab this. So this is a example of a paper circuit that I'm passing around that doesn't actually do anything because it's one of Peter's really old things, but it's one of the first designs of the deer horn organ, which is that antenna organ that Peter was playing in that video. Yeah, and this is what the front and back of a paper circuit look like, and this is the synth that I'm building also. It's also connected to the same lineage of the bed synth that Daniel made. Yeah, so the Sidrasi, which is the paper circuit we're building, and there's also 2 kits up here for sale, which I guess can happen after the presentation if anyone is interested. And then, yeah, this is my build of the circuit. Yeah, but it's a electronic organ, the same lineage of the shit synth and the marriage of like gesture. So it's meant to be a synth that you touch and play with your hands, or you can patch it with banana cables if you are so inclined. But it's supposed to be the noise of gesture, and then when you go away from it, it is silent. Yeah, and then the same idea. This is way later, but this is the Gamelan Gongs was a project of Peter's and his friends where it's a marriage of playing the Sidrasi. Oh yeah, so the band was called the Sidrasi Gamelan, and it is a marriage of playing these synthesizers along with like traditional gamelan gong players. Also the marriage of like ritual and culture and performance. Yeah, and these are more paper circuits that I've built, and some of Peter's weird instruments. Like he built this synth into a street sign, which is, I think, so awesome. And more things. I copied and pasted these from another presentation. So, and then the idea of, I can just open, actually you can see. Yeah, so Peter's instruments are very weird, and he has his own sort of way of labeling things, which makes putting his circuits together easier, in my opinion, because it's kind of like putting a puzzle together where you have different elements and like a master legend that shows you what each symbol does, and then you just match them up and then put your components where it says they should go. Like if the symbol for a Harry capacitor is this, then it means that you can put a random capacitor in that point. And I think adding places like the idea of the Harry capacitor where you can have like randomness, or you get to choose what range for things that you want, is also really important in I guess the kits that he was building, because it encourages experimentation. And then going on to the next part of this is the things that you will need for soldering if you haven't soldered before. But how many of you have soldered things before? Oh, awesome. Okay, great. So I don't need to go super in-depth onto this. But yeah, these are things that I will have in front of me in a second. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation. But if you guys have any questions, ask them. And then we can switch to the like top-down camera. So it's like fancy. Oh yes. So this is like the first like official like workshop. So it's satisfying to see things. Yeah. Okay. So this part is like gonna be half Q&A and half me like explaining what I'm doing. So you can like stop me or interrupt me at any time. So yeah, we're gonna speed run this build and try and do it in like an hour. I kind of started a little bit, but yeah. And then hopefully it is like done by the end so you can hear it also. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. It's the hardware version of it's live hardware, live, yeah, live hardware coding. So there's a specific layout that it's just I like because there's the way the Ciat-Lonbarde works is that there's a jack in the middle that when you're playing it, you touch it to that jack, and that's the jack that puts the audio out. And then there's like a Ciat-Lonbarde strong force and weak force, which, whatever that means. And yeah, there are like two. This is like the one I'm building, which is like kind of a modded version, which just adds switches for the ranges. So there's 5 capacitors, and you can switch the ranges by adding a switch for the Harry capacitor that's random. And then here is the kits that are just the all of the nodes. And this is random wood from the RISD wood scrap pile. And mine has like a walnut back to it. But yeah. And ask me questions because I'm just going to be up here like figuring this out.
Wait, use the mic. Use the mic.
Thanks. So the Ciat-Lonbarde, this circuit, this was something that Peter designed. Is that the idea, the circuit arrangement itself?
Yeah. So Peter designed this circuit. It has a long lineage of different versions of it. So this is the little Ciat-Lonbarde that I'm making. This was his he made a page called Paper Circuits where he put up all of his paper circuits, and this was like the paper circuit version of a circuit that was in a bunch of different modules. Like there's a Ciat-Lonbarde organ, which was the synth that had the bars on it that are like not touch capacitive, but they have piezos on them, so when you push it like outputs positive voltage, and when you release it outputs negative voltage. And he used that on the lineage of like Ciat-Lonbarde and Tetrasi and the Tetrax organ and the Ciat-Lonbarde organ, which are some other instruments. Yeah. So right now I'm just screwing on the banana jacks. And these are like cheap. Oh yeah, another thing I want to talk about is where to order like components from. So there's like Tata, which is what I use, and there's like cheap banana jacks on there. Because banana jacks are expensive. Like good Pomona ones are expensive, and you can do that if you want. But these are nice because you can also touch them. Like banana jacks are usually like plastic, but these are good for this type of build. And then they have a little tab on them that will let you that you solder to make the connection to the wire. And then the orientation is also important because you want it to be in a place that you can actually solder to. So getting that right from the start is good.
Femi, can you say the name of the website again?
Oh, Tata Electronics is the name of the website that you can order components from. You can also order them from DigiKey, and they're just different electronic component places.
Can you spell Tater?
Tata,
Tata.
Tayda.
Can you also tell us where you can find the paper circuits?
Yes,
What
you can
website?
find the paper circuits on Peter's website, Ciat-Lonbarde.net. If you go to Ciat-Lonbarde, also Peter's site is amazing. It's like 90s HTML in the best way, and he's super like experimental with different pages on it. but there is a page called Paper Circuits, and you can already see the psychoticness of it. But yeah, and you kind of have to navigate this, but there's a bunch. So the solar sounders are Bird Monk Train, and this is the print for them. And then Little Sadrazi is here somewhere. Download the sheet. This is old Mr. Grassy. If anyone wants, also I have like I have the paper circuit files and like Gerber files if you want to order PCBs.
Yeah, Femi, maybe you could share some links and materials
Yeah, absolutely.
with us afterward, and then we can share it with everyone that came and make it available.
He also has like a collection on here of just like different people's builds. Like someone made like a dead bug style paper circuit that's just like no paper, it's just wires, and it looks super pretty. And then some people's random like crazy things. But he encourages like super like experimental ways of building things. But I'm just building into wood for simplicity and to be fast about it.
Femi, I'm curious about your experience playing the paper circuits as instruments versus playing something that has like a PCB and panel-mounted components that's a bit more robust. Is there a difference in your experience between the way you approach those instruments as instruments based on their materials and their fragility?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really like so much more of like a so much more interaction and so much more of like I feel more connected to the circuit, being able to just like pick it up and not know what things do and kind of develop like an intuitive sense for playing it. And it kind of traps you into like, I could just play this thing for hours because like the slightest move of your finger capacitance might change the whole sound completely. It really gives like so much more of like human feel to it. And I started off playing modular and then was building these paper circuits and trying to figure out how to use them both together. And then I found like I was straying away from my modular more, or I was just playing Peter's instruments more, just because of that interaction. Because when I was sitting at my modular, like I was using, modular is a whole other thing. I also like went super into like using a lot of digital modules. So sitting at my modular kind of became like sitting at my computer again because I was like coding on my modular. But I think they're just different. I mean, I still perform with both of them because there are certain sounds I can only get from modular, like that super digital, like harsh, granular sound. But then there's also, like, I love the idea of organic and generative music. So having that touch capacity or like having something more random or organic that also like doing a bunch of research on this, like knowing the history of the synth and like how it was designed and like Peter's personal like Peter's geography, like where he was living and how he was interacting with the world being so embedded in the synthesizer made me have so much more of like a connection to it or an understanding of like what the synth is. Yeah, if that answers your question. And the rest of this is just soldering, so I need to just put these in. Oh, thank you. You can place it wherever. Thank you.
Femi, I'm reminded of sort of Peter's work with Michael Weiswitz's work with the Crackle Box. He did some early systems in the 70s, where he was again using his hands in the circuit and sometimes electrocuting himself, but most of the time just making sort of amazing, sort of very chaotic sort of sounds.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you'd sort of thought about some of those earlier folks, and some of those
that
things.
Was doing
that
it, yeah. No, there are for sure a lot. I don't. The thing with me and like Peter's stuff is that I super dived into Peter's whole world, and like there are so many people doing like weird like in the like early 80s and 90s, and this goes like way back to like even like electroacoustic stuff, people experimenting with like lab equipment that has been kind of also romanticized by like Heinbach and other people on YouTube,
Right,
the lab
yes.
equipment thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I dove into Peter's world and then forgot about everything else. But yeah, no, for sure there are, but I have researched some of those people in the past.
No, it's a wonderful continuum of people sort of, you know, thinking in innovative ways about, you know, sort of a technology that is sort of shaped by, you know, corporate needs and, you know, production
for sure.
capacities and those sort of artistic responses to those materials in a very playful sort of way. So it sort of seems to me that there's this nice continuum, you know, occurring, a sort of semi-anarchic sort of response, and then at the same time, you know, there's this sort of this through line that goes back to, in fact, some folks that were sort of quite tied in with people at Roulette and that sort of stuff back into the early 70s, well, the mid 70s and the 80s. So as I say, I was thinking of Michael Weisfitz, but also the chap who did a lot of brain circuit, Peter Rosenbaum, David Rosenboom, or Bohm. So yeah, this is a nice continuation of this.
Yeah, for sure. I think also this is like anti-AI synthesizer, which is cool because like I can see like even like now I can see like a modular brand that like you put out a module and it's in a black box and you put in your synth and you don't know what's behind it, but it could be an AI oscillator. But yeah, knowing that it's paper inside is reassuring. Knowing that this like wood that came from a tree that's like miles away is reassuring to me.
So Femi, could you tell us some of the differences between the paper circuit and the design and the version you're doing now? And also, like another question is, with the paper circuits, are you able to just print off using like paper at home, the design? Is it just normal paper?
Yeah, so Peter designed these so that it's just like this is just like a 8.5 by 11-inch piece of paper, and then you print it and cut it out, and on the back there are traces for where you bend the solder leads, and on the front are like what components you're putting through. So this is, both of these are through-hole sort of design, so it means that you have your component and you put it through the hole on either the PCB or the paper circuit. The PCB is the PCB is fiberglass. It's like manufactured for like a bunch of different reasons, but you can be like precise about the thickness of it. It's also hard. You don't have to do the thing where you are bending to solder the leads to make the connections between the circuit. It has a layer of copper on the inside that makes the connections. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can see on the back the layer underneath of all the connections. So all you have to do is put the components through and solder on the different points, which is different than the paper circuit because you need to bend. So in my example, like you need to bend these over or make longer connections with like some other piece. So the copper that I used on this is just so that I can get from one piece to the end, and I was being a little bit fancy with it instead of just using like some other wire for fun. But yeah, this is the main difference.
Yeah, thank you.
Femi, I'll ask a question while I look around for other questions. How do you feel? Something I think about a lot is with Peter's designs is how much time I spend looking at manuals that other people have made for it, and then reading the essays that he's made for each instrument, but then even as I do that over and over and over again, if I take a break from an instrument and I come back to it, I'm back in a sort of space of kind of play again, because I don't necessarily, because there's this poetic layer to the designs and a lack of labeling on the front end, the performative end of the instrument. So I just wonder if you'd talk about your relationship to that.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about it with the knob shrine, but I'd love to hear more about how you think about it.
Yeah, Peter is really weird about the way he designs his circuits, and there's a bunch of weird symbols, and sometimes people don't know what those are, especially with his earlier circuits. I was gonna say there's there's a forum that's been super helpful for paper circuits on Lines.
Can you tell everybody what Lines?
Yeah,
I mean, maybe everybody in this room knows what Lines is, but you could say it.
Yeah, Lines is a a very specific forum for a few specific electronic music equipment things. There's a couple modules that are super in depth that there's a forum of a bunch of a community of people, and the forum has been super useful in demystifying a lot of Peter's circuits. There's also kind of a fun about the circuits being mysterious, so it kind of gets lost when you super understand a circuit and everything that it does. But then, like you were saying, when you step away from it for a while and come back to it, that feeling of play and interacting with something that's the unknown is also super fun. And people are always asking questions on gear and what to buy or how to design circuits. And this goes all the way back to 2016. And people have schematics that they drew, or oh, I ordered this PCB, but I don't know what any of the symbols mean. Could someone here help me figure it out? There's one person, Crucifix, Josh, that has been really, really into, and Rodrigo have been really into turning all of Peter's paper circuits, which were just Osmond files, which is just a circuit making program, but turning them into PCBs that can just be ordered. So there's less of that making the whole circuit design. You could just order it, and there's so much more documentation than there was even 3 years ago. A lot of people have made so much progress on the design, demystifying the designs and making it easier to build, and that's what also led me here today to be doing this, because I can actually explain what things are now that there's documentation. Huh?
It's Lines.
Oh, yeah.
Lines,
So it's
yeah.
just it's
The
8
website
L's.
is LL. How many L's is it?
Yeah, let me check actually.
It's a bunch of L's.com.
I think it's 8Ls.co.
.co.
But if you look up Lines forum, I think it shows up.
And some of the PCBs are sold on Reverb. People sell them on Reverb.com, but I think they probably have their own sites too.
Yeah.
Don't do that? What?
Yeah, people shouldn't. I mean, it's cheap to order PCBs, and then they sell them on Reverb for $20 a PCB, which is so insane. But
so is it better to order it on just to find people on Lines directly and order from them, or do you just order the PCBs to be manufactured from the paper circuit?
It's a good question, because there's also a little bit of gatekeeping with the PCBs, because people are oh, I spent all this time making a PCB of Peter's old circuit. Spent years trying to figure out a PCB. So you have to ask me if you want the file for it. But I don't know what Josh would say about this, but I can send you circuits, because I think everyone should just be building them. Yeah. So JLC PCB is a website where you can upload what's called a Gerber file, and then it will just you would get the PCB. So I can do I can show you. Yes, JLC PCB. So there are paper circuits, which are just like you print them out on 8.5 by 11 inch. And yeah, Crucifix makes a lot of the, like he also designed, like remixed and designed some of these circuits. And the Gerber is just like a zip file that you get from converting it to a PCB, and then you just drag it in, and it will upload it. And yeah, the workflow for, like, Peter uses Osmon to design his PCBs, which was like a super old program, and I think he's just used to it for so long. But the way that Josh and a few other people do it is that they use KiCad or some other CAD software to like trace out each trace or like make certain file things. Yeah, I'm gonna start soldering now. Yeah, so this
I
is
have a question for you when you're
PCB.
ready.
Hmm?
I have a question for you when you're ready.
Where? Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Hi. So the lines community, I'm pretty sure that was originally designed as a form for monome devices.
Oh, okay.
And it's funny because I think maybe one of your stills was from Flash Crash. I can't remember, but the guy that ran Flash Crash was also the moderator for lines.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Tyler. But I was gonna ask you something a little bit more abstract. So there's a monome community which actually connects with teletype, which is one of the things you use. And then there's also Peter's stuff, and there's also, even Laurie Mill, and these are people that
Esoteric.
yeah, they're the esoterics. They're like the witches of this. And they're also like the constellation that we're kind of in right now when you're talking about this. So my question is more philosophical. Like, where do you see yourself focusing? I know that you're presenting this to people, but what are some words that you want to use when you're thinking about how you're gathering this as like your stars in this constellation of things, and then what do you see as a development that will continue, like not just with us, but like what are some ideas that you see continuing to the future?
For the future of this?
Yeah, just like all this stuff, and like what do
Yeah.
you expect to see? What would you like to see?
I'm hoping it's a resurgence of people being less, like people treating technology less like it's this sacred like object that has to be protected. Like I think like a computer is just an object that I can like hold and like throw up in the air and catch if I wanted to. Like it's not like this. Even though it's like money, it's like, oh, this is a expensive thing, I want to take care of it, but it's also just like a physical object. And I'm hoping with synthesizers it's the same way. Like I shouldn't have to have a heart attack when like my modular falls over. Like it's really scary. And I think that's also why I've been kind of straying away from my modular. It's because it's like this thing is too fragile, and if it breaks, I don't know how I'm ever going to get it again, and some other things. So I think the technology is just, it's there, it's a tool. It's not this thing that needs to be thought of that particular way. And then the thing with this is that it's grounding for me. Like it's making something with my hands and knowing the history of it, and knowing that the materials come from like both synthetic and natural places. Like that marriage makes me comfortable with what I'm dealing with, like spiritually. Yeah. And then what I'm doing right now, oh, okay, it's zoomed pretty good. This is okay, I'll do a new one in a second, but this is a resistor, and if I look up, master legend. How do you open the image in text?
Double click it.
I don't know. Okay. So, tells you what things are. Well, the resistors are just labeled, so it kind of defeats the purpose of me looking for that. But yeah, I have my 22K resistor, and I'm bending the leads so that it's straight down, like it comes in a strip like this, flat, and I'm bending them, putting them through the board, and to keep them 2.2K. To keep them in the same spot when I'm moving the board around, I'm bending the legs on the other side. So when I put it through, I bend the legs, and then when I'm ready to solder, I can just tap those points. And I'll solder all the 2.2 resistors first. Another way I like to do it, and I kind of like how Peter's boards are designed because of this, is that I can, if there are two resistors next to each other, like there will be over here, on the other side, I can bend one in one direction and bend the other direction so that they're not overlapping, so it makes it easier to solder. And I don't know if Peter was thinking about that. And also, it's like such a beautiful object, so it's also fun to solder that way. Yeah, just finding all the 2.2K resistors and putting them through. There's also more of Peter's work that I can show while I'm doing this. Should I do that? Unless people have questions. There's one more, and I don't know where it is. Oh, but then you have to switch it back, so maybe not. Oh, you couldn't see my screen when I was showing you stuff, sorry. I guess that's what the whole thing was. But that's fine.
So just a technical question. So you were saying these banana plugs, because they don't have the plastic parts, you can just touch this version of the instrument?
Yes,
Yeah. Those are cool.
it's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, soldering speed run 6, 7. Yeah.
Any soldering tips while you're soldering?
I don't know. I think I kind of solder crazy, so we'll see. I don't know. I guess a tip is to be, if other people have tips, they should say it too.
That's what I was just gonna say. Yeah. Skill share.
Be fast about it, I guess, because if you leave the solder on there too long, then it's like weird or something. Iron to heat up. Yeah, I don't know what heat my soldering iron should even be at, but it's on 850. If that's too hot, then someone should let me know. Huh? What kind of solder? Lead-free solder. Well, hopefully, or maybe it is lead. But I have a fan here. Huh? Okay. So.
You're fast.
Fast with it. I have to be. Yes, this whole thing is through hole. All of Peter's circuits that he releases to the public are through Hole.
Oh, okay.
Peter has like instruments that he has for sale that are mostly surface mount, but they're manufactured so that he can sell them through Patchpoint or some other stores.
Right. Because I'm thinking there's a couple of builders like NLC, the nonlinear circuits chap, and he's making surface mount boards, but the idea is you hand solder them, which is quite an exercise in magnifying glasses and things like this. But it's
people say that and now I'm just cutting the leads off so that there's room for new stuff with the snippers. But people say that, and this might get messy in a sec, but I'll clean it up. People say that soldering surface mount stuff is easier, but I think that's a lie.
In some respects, it is a bit because you're using less solder.
Yeah,
but,
right. But
so
maybe I'm just scared, I think.
Yeah, I had done a circuit recently. I hadn't really ever built any of them with surface mount, and it's sort of true, at least in my experience, that it sort of has to do with how you're holding it. You're putting a little bit of solder there. You're holding the thing down. You touch it once, bang, it's done. Whereas there's a lot more. Did I get the solder fully around the little hole? Did I get this? Did I get a dry solder joint? All these sort of things. So, but it's all wonderful. So.
I think there's also the strategy of doing the with the stencil. Do you know what I'm talking about? You can order like kind of the same way screen printing works. You can order a stencil with all of the 220K with all of the holes for where the components go, and then you silkscreen it with solder paste, and then you put all the components in the place they're supposed to be, and then you put it in the oven, and then it melts the solder where all of the components are, and that's like a faster way. They're both tedious, but I think if I was doing it, that would be the way to do it if I was careful about it.
Femi, I feel cruel asking another kind of philosophical question when you have to concentrate like this, so sorry.
Yeah, no, please.
A lot of times in the presentation today, you kind of mentioned this concept of nature or the natural. And one thing that is always interesting to me is like what you're doing right now requires so much modern logistical technology, computer-aided design, PCBs manufactured in China, shipped across the world, a website to have all the paper templates and printers and everything. And I'm just curious about your thoughts about, the relationship between, you used the word earlier, synthetic, but maybe like technology or computing technology, logistical technology, and like the natural as a very broad category. Because like in your presentation, you showed you would bring these instruments to places that are not urban places, let's say, or like, a hiking trail up an old logging road to like a concrete foundation that was poured at some point that now is like abandoned, which is, feels different in a different, or like separated from, I don't know, where you live. But just curious about your thoughts about like the natural and the technological as you have to concentrate and put all these resistors in their holes.
It's interesting. I guess what I'll say about that is like, I don't know. I think it's always both. It's never like I'm super into nature or I'm like super on technology. And not to bring up Instagram, but like I love Instagram Reels, and I like my practice with sad noise, which is like my performance aspect, is that it's so embedded in like early internet culture and like memes and just like stupid like internet stuff, but then also like abstracting it through like synthesizers that are made of wood, and that sort of crazy contrast or like dichotomy between something that is super like online infrastructurally and performance and ritual. So like manipulating things that people interact with every day and changing them into some abstracted otherworldly experience that makes you uncomfortable is like super interesting to me, because it changes the way you might think about things. Like you might, I might like sample a like ASMR YouTube video, but then it turns into like alien, like ambient texture language, and transforming things into like sounds that are almost impossible, or almost like they are similar or familiar, but also far apart in the same way. Yeah.
Ted, to your point, like this is like almost 20 years ago now, but we had Jessica Ryland at Roulette back at the 20 Green Street space, and she gave a performance that included a presentation where she just talked about, I mean, this is kind of an extension of what you're asking, but she talked about how frustrated she became when she started realizing how related all of these components were to weapons manufacturers.
Oh, yeah.
And how there's no extricating, there's kind of no extricating that, you know, economically or just technologically. And I thought that's also one of the really intense paradoxes of being engaged in this stuff creatively.
Yeah.
There are plenty of architecture firms that both like work for the School Construction Authority and Raytheon, like in this world, and it's like kind of the industry. Yeah. I was going to just like shamelessly pitch. So we were the person that organized that hiking trip with Femi. Our name is M. Nice to meet you. And we're going to be doing another one very soon.
Yes.
So if you like to hike and like to make noise in the woods, please
I'll send that in the list of links.
Please come out and enjoy that with us. And then the one thing I will say to your question, person in front of me, is that really like being on a stage does not feel like, to me, always like you're sharing. It feels like you're presenting.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily have to always be that way.
For sure.
And like nature certainly is being on a stage presenting in front of people, but I think like acknowledging that the stage is everywhere kind of decouples us from this very platonic cave kind of vibe where we're like looking in one direction, and it's like it portends a certain kind of like everyone has to behave this way, and like a lot of it points in a lot of directions of conduct and all these things that we should all be decoupling ourselves from in terms of performing and such. So yeah, it's like naturalism, but it's not. It's like just I can see that with like even the circuit that he's working on is like, and him talking about Peter's like design is like it goes in a direction, we don't really know what it does, but by doing it, we'll find out what it's going to do.
Yeah. Also, I mean, yeah, so yeah, I hadn't been here before also, so this is more of an official situation for me than I was expecting. And I think that's just, I mean, that's completely awesome for documentation and sharing, because I think everything should be shared, and if this is the most documented it could be, that's like the best thing ever. So this is like amazing for me, but at the same time, there's also like, I wish I could be like sitting right next to all of you. And that is just like circumstances of different places. And I think just like I'm doing this over and over in different environments and like different spaces is the way to continue that, because there's a different level of interactivity in every architecture that you go into, and there are places made for performance. There are places made for there are like academic spaces that I performed in, but then there's also like basement shows and noise tables and a bunch of things. And I wouldn't want to be doing this in a basement either. So there's like situational and architectural awareness is important, and being like really flowy about that too, being like open to both playing in like an academic space, but then also playing like a noise show where you're not getting paid anything. I think being in both communities is extremely important. I think people have very strong opinions about that, and I've experienced that too. Like even going to Providence, like when I went to RISD and I was trying to play noise shows, it was just like, oh, you go to RISD though, like, but it's not like I could do anything about that. But you get involved in the community, and then it comes back to you. So that's what I have to say about that. I don't remember which one I took off. This is 2.2 m 47K. Yes, it's annoying. Like this only happened to me. Well, it's happened to me a couple times. There's the first thing I ever built was really ambitious because it was like Peter's drum machine, like paper circuits, where I was building all of them into one box, and I did a bunch of it wrong and didn't label anything, but it still made sound, and I was actually like surprised at it making sound for how wrong I built it, which I think is also a beauty of Peter's instruments. And then there was another one that I built, and this kind of talks about other people remixing Peter's circuits or trying to adapt them. I was building Peter's paper circuits alongside some of Josh's original designs and trying to build them into the same box, and then I built all of it, and then none of it worked. So there's also an ethos which, like, if I'm building Peter stuff, I'm only going to build Peter stuff.
I love the fact that, you're using natural materials, for your synthesizer, boxes and so forth, but, and wood in particular. And of course, wood has been a traditional building material for many different cultures, musical instruments. So I'm just sort of wondering if you'd sort of thought, or if you've done some work in, or, just even considered the idea of sort of more hybrid instruments, say, I don't know, strings over wood, or, wood as percussion and contact mics and those sort of things. Just sort of using the particular resonances of the unique piece of material that you're working with, the woods that you're working with, and sort of incorporating those into the sound that the synthesizer, or be it synth or any form of electronics, sort of responds to. So sort of, binding those two materials together in perhaps a more unified form. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I haven't built any instruments that are necessarily a hybrid between like a DIY circuit and a like more traditional instrument, but I've had ideas with a few people on building some things, like Daniel that did the Sidrazi bed. I worked with Daniel over the summer building a bunch of like circuits for his own stuff, and then also learning some like circuit design. And Daniel makes daxophones, which is like the weird like bowed instrument that's just like a plank of wood that you bow with either a violin bow or a cello bow or anything. And those, I've had the idea of marrying like one of Peter's delay circuits, or we both had the idea of marrying one of the delay circuits with like something like that, because Peter makes the Coco Quantus, which I have up here actually. That is a dual delay made for the interaction of like more traditional instruments as a way to manipulate sound, and I think that's why that's also popular, is because it caters to people that are used to playing more traditional instruments and adds like a layer of uncertainty and randomness. And I've had some ideas, but I should have more. I should do it. I should act on it. Yeah. I don't think I'm gonna finish this before, but
That's all good.
we tried.
To bring it back to the circuit, you mentioned the hairy capacitors. So there's a couple situations in these designs where you have kind of randomness kind of baked into the design, and then are there also possibilities for you to make design decisions as the builder? Like, are there any places where it's like, use this resistor, you can pick the resistance of this and it'll change it in some way, or anything like that? Sorry, that's kind of a basic.
No, yeah. I mean, I try not to. I mean, unless it's like a hairy capacitor where it's like encouraged to mod it, I try not to change resistors and things, because I just assume that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Some mods that you can do are, there's also the mod for the switches that you can switch through the different hairy capacitors. Like, that's not necessarily, well, he does encourage it, but it's not part of the board. Like, you could just solder a random resistor there. That's one design decision. The way you connect is another design decision. Like, this is banana jacks, but this could be like nails or like push pins or like whatever you can solder to. He likes brass pegs a lot. A lot of his old instruments were just brass screws that encouraged play and touch. And he was doing performances for a long time that were, he would have a bunch of patch points that made different connections internally in the circuit, but outboard, like, nothing was labeled. It was just like a bed of brass pegs, and he would go to the gas station and buy a bag of worms and then perform by like dumping the bag of worms on the synthesizer, and then all the patch points would make weird, crazy sounds, because the worms are also moving, so they have their own life. And then at the end of the performance, the worms would die. So it's a cycle. And then he also there's a YouTube video that everyone should watch called Fish Guts, which is on his channel. And it's exactly what you think it is. It's his Sadrazi synthesizer with all the patch nodes, and he is frying mackerel on the side and dipping the fish in like the eggs and then putting it on the synth and then frying it and then putting it back on the synth and then eating it. And it's like a whole experience, because again, it's like, why can't the synth also be the cutting board, or why can't the synth also be like a dish to eat off of, or a bed?
Simple recommendation for Peter, getting into Peter's universe, is that for a long time he did a graduate program at Wesleyan, and he wrote for his thesis Stores at the Mall, and it was published as a PDF on his website. I don't know if it still is, but it's a great introduction to his thinking about and all of his designs.
Yeah, it's still there.
Still there?
Still there. Or you can find it by looking it up. But
just Googling it, yeah.
I'll also put that in the links.
Cool.
Make a zip file of like everything, like 50 gigabyte zip file. Anything else?
We can end it here, Femi, if you want, and people could come up and take a look and
yeah,
talk.
Actually, people should come up here.
Yeah.
Because I don't even think I can reasonably finish this whole thing, but it was fun to try.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much, Femi. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Thanks, guys.